Good morning, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be able to speak to you. I'm just very sorry that I can't be there in person, but thanks to the wonders of technology and YouTube, I'm very glad that I'm going to be able to talk to this very distinguished group of other speakers and to such a large number of wonderful girls who are thinking today about their future careers and their working lives. I spent most of my career, almost 4 decades, in book publishing before I had an unexpected change to moving across to becoming Chief Executive of the Girls' Day School Trust. The Girls' Day School Trust has 26 schools, 2 of which are academies, and it educates 20,000 girls aged from 3 to 18. And so for the last 2 years I've obviously spent a great deal of time thinking about what turns a bright, excitable 5-year-old into a poised young woman who will leave school and then leave university ready to enter the world of work and to succeed there. People often ask me, a great deal in fact, is what you do now very different from publishing? And I say, well, yes, of course it is, but in many ways there are things that are similar. For example, in publishing we have best-selling authors who are incredibly important. In education we have fabulous heads like Mrs. Hilary French, who is the head of the wonderful GDST Central Newcastle High School, from which school many of you come. In publishing we have bestseller lists and we feel very pleased and proud when a book gets to #1. But I feel just as pleased and proud when I see a whole row of Girls' Day School Trust schools in the league tables in the Times or the Daily Telegraph. In publishing, books are what you produce. In the Girls' Day School Trust, girls are what we produce. Happy, confident girls ready to go out into the world and the workplace. I've spent a lot of time in the last 2 years talking to our sixth formers about their aspirations and ambitions, and I've also talked to some of our very distinguished alumni, for example, a young woman who was Vice President of Goldman Sachs at the age of 28, somebody else who was Global HR Director for Unilever at the age of 31. And what's interesting about these young women is they all say, despite having risen so far in their careers, that they have found barriers to getting on because of their gender. The glass ceiling does still exist, and it's not all easy for women in the workplace. The industry I came from, publishing, actually has had a number of women leaders, and the woman I worked for, Dame Marjorie Scardino, who ran Pearson, was the first woman ever to be the chief executive of a FTSE 100 company, and she's still there 15 years later. And I've seen lots of women thrive at levels below that. And it's true, in large organisations, hundreds of young women start out, but not all of them get to the top. And so I've given a lot of thought to what characteristics really mark out the people who are going to be high flyers from those who, unfortunately, for whatever reason, are going to get stuck. And I think one of the big reasons is courage. One of the markers of a young woman who's going to go far is the courage to speak out. For example, in publishing, at an editorial meeting, it's very easy if you have a view that isn't quite the same as all the other people's view of a prospective book or author to keep quiet. But I notice the 23 or the 24-year-old who's read that book and actually is prepared to say her view, even if it isn't what everyone else believes. One of our schools has a Latin motto, vincit qui se vincit, she conquers who conquers herself. Or in the words of that American best-selling self-help book, feel the fear and do it anyway. It's not that the workplace isn't frightening, because it can be, but those who can conquer that fear and conquer themselves and speak out go far. Whether it's standing up for a book you really support, or being the one perhaps with the courage to say that the emperor has no clothes, it's difficult to do. And I think that preparedness to speak out is really important. I also think one of the things young women have to be prepared to do in the workplace is to ask for more money. I'm sure that many of you were shocked, as I was last week, to hear that on average male executives are paid $10,000 a year more than female executives. But one of the reasons I've noticed is that when you offer a job to a young man, whatever salary you offer, he will always say, oh, with a rather disappointed look, I was expecting more than that. And employers usually respond to that, whereas a young woman will very often be so thrilled to get the job, she'll say thank you and just accept what she's offered. And in fact, at the moment, I'm giving, as it were, career advice to my youngest daughter who works on The Guardian and has just had a promotion, and she has to go in and negotiate her new salary. So I was giving her lots of tips about how to do that and saying it's like Oliver Twist, you know, don't be afraid to ask for more. There are many reasons, not just being prepared to ask for more, why there is such a big gender pay gap. But one of the things I've certainly noticed in large organisations, and one of my second pieces of advice to young women after be brave and conquer your fears, is don't be afraid to claim your successes. In many organisations, it's very typical to see a young woman who's doing absolutely fantastic work, but sort of sitting quietly in a corner getting on with it and thinking to herself, well, the work I'm doing is so great, people will notice. Well, the awful truth is they won't, because everyone in big organisations is so busy getting on with everything and running around. But the young man at the desk next to her may have just done one great thing, but you can absolutely bet your bottom dollar he will wave his hand in the air and say, look at me, look at me, look at this wonderful thing I've done. So I say very strongly to girls, don't be afraid to claim your successes. It's not boasting, it's claiming what you've done, and you need to do that. When I first put this view to a very large group of headmistresses in the autumn of last year, in the Q&A session afterwards, one of the heads said, but surely, Miss Fraser, modesty is a characteristic that we are all supposed to inculcate in our girls. And I said, well, you know, I'm a big fan of modesty. I think modesty is a great quality, but to be honest, it will not get you on in working life. And many women are wonderfully articulate, but you need to learn to articulate your achievements to those around you and not sit in the corner. And if you're going to reach the heights of those GDST alumni I mentioned, it's really vital. My third piece of advice for getting on in the workplace is to cultivate the ability to be what one of our sixth formers called subtly bossy. And I think this is something that actually is a great characteristic of lots of GDST girls. A lot of young women, when they enter an organisation and they're aware that it's a hierarchy, they think that as they move up the hierarchy, they'll be able to sort of tell people to do things and they'll do them. Well, I've found in my experience that actually it's not like the army. People don't do things because you tell them to. They do things because you persuade, cajole, convince, and really manage them so that you get done the things that you want to get done in an organisation. And being effective in an organisation, you can only be effective as you become senior if you can actually make a lot of people do a lot of things. So it is being subtly bossy, but I have to say it's also very important to be charming. People don't respond well to barked orders. You need to cultivate a kind of relationship with them so that when you ask them to do something, they really want to do it and they want to please you. Charm is vitally important. I think it's important for men as well as for women in organisations, and I think it's very difficult to rise to the top without it. Albert Camus had a very good line on charm. He said, charm is a way of getting the answer you want without having asked any very clear question. So to all of you here today, about to set off into the world of work or taking the first steps on the career ladder, I would just reiterate, have courage, blow your own trumpet, and be subtly bossy. And I wish you all the very, very best in your future career paths, which I'm sure are going to be brilliant. Thank you.